Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a very warm welcome to our exclusive webinar on Education Trust, Securing Tomorrow's Future. I'm so excited to have you join us today. Now, for those attending the webinar for the first time, please do well to drop your favorite emoji in the chat box. And for those of us that have been here once again, we're so excited to have you here with us. My name is Samuel Ako. I serve as a trust manager here at Afrinvest Trustees, and it is my true pleasure to be your host this morning. I'm even more delighted to be joined by my colleague, Chisom Owobu, who is our head of trust services, as we walk you through today's exciting session. Together, we'll be sharing insights, real-life scenarios, and practical steps on how education trust can help you secure a brighter future for your children. With that being said, here we have a quick look at what we'll be covering in today's session. So you are well abreast of what to expect. We'll be looking at a brief introduction to Afrinvest West Africa. Start by telling you just a little bit about us as a company, our operating subsidiaries, in which Afrinvest Trustees is a part of, and how we've been helping families and institutions alike secure their financial future. Next, we'll take a step back to look at how education trust has evolved in our country, highlighting both the progress made and the gaps that still exist. From there, we will dive deep into the conversation today, which is what an education trust really is and how it works and why it's such a powerful tool for parents who wants to secure the future of their kids. To make it even more relatable, we'll be speaking about some real-life scenarios, showing you how exactly an education trust is structured to make a lasting difference. Chisom will go ahead much later to speak about the commonly asked questions by parents and guardians, so you could walk away with clarity and confidence. Beyond that, we'll share a quick snapshot of other of our trust solutions that could be aidful for you and your family. And finally, we'll be wrapping up by showing you how you could reach us and next step after this session. So as you can see from the table of contents, it's going to be an exciting and a very practical session. You would walk away with not just information, but actionable steps that you can start applying right away. So Afrinvest West Africa, which is also known as AWAL, is a leading capital market holding company with strong focus on West Africa. We operate across 6 key areas, which are the investment banking, security trading, assets management, trust services, investment research and consulting, as well as technology. Today, Afrinvest proudly operates 7 subsidiaries in which Afrinvest Trustees is part of. And it's also notable to mention that Afrinvest is over 30 years old. At Afrinvest, we pride ourselves on deep market knowledge, rigorous analysis, independence, driven advice that comes handy to our clients. The most importantly, we are committed to driving innovation, client-focused solutions that empowers businesses and investors to thrive. So now to the business of the day. Understanding the roots, a brief history of education in Nigeria. Now, to really appreciate the importance of planning for education, it helps to understand where we're coming from. Education in Nigeria didn't start with classrooms or chalkboards or even whiteboards. In the pre-colonial era, children often learned informally through trades, family values, and survival skills that was passed down by observation and apprenticeship. Then came the colonial era where missionaries introduced Western-style education, which was mostly focused on religion and literacy. But the access as at that time was limited, with only a selected few Nigerians benefiting from it. Then, after the independence in 1960, things began to change. The government expanded more schools across other parts of the country, positioned education as one of the key drivers for development. For a time, the access improved, but as the population of the country grew, challenges quickly set in. Challenges such as limited funding, teacher shortages, poor infrastructure, and of course, the most frequent one that we're all familiar or aware of, strikes. Fast forward to today. Yes, we have more schools, both private and public schools, but the cost of education keeps rising. For parents that are aiming to send their kids to private schools as well as international schools, the bills can actually be very, very overwhelming. On top of that, statistics shows that over 10 million children are still out of schools and countless others facing disruptions when their sponsor is unable to continue, whether due to, say, job loss, illness, or even death. And that's why the conversation like today's is very important because planning ahead with the right tools can make the difference between interrupted education and a secure future. Now, let's talk about the education gap. This gap simply means unequal access to quality or good education. And in Nigeria, it is mostly driven by poverty, social inequality, poor infrastructure, and even insecurity. Now, to add to that, the rising cost of education, the reality is that only a small fraction of Nigerians can actually comfortably send their children to top tier schools. But the tough question, which I think is one we should all ask ourselves, is what happens if a parent or a sponsor suddenly passes away or becomes incapacitated? The answer would be many children are forced to drop out of school. Their dreams are either delayed or, in some cases, are completely shattered. Surviving family members often settle for substandard schools, and some children are even pushed to early work and marriages. And let's be clear, this gap doesn't just hurt families alone, it hurts us as a nation. When children miss out of proper education, they are less likely to contribute meaningfully to the economy, and the cycle of poverty actually continues. That's why exactly we're having this conversation, in order to put a structured plan for your kids' education, which is so crucial. Now, to take a closer look at some of the major challenges that's facing education in Nigeria and the consequences that they carry. First, we have 10.5 million children out of school according to the UNICEF 2024 data, and as a result, interrupted education journey for many and many young people. Next, poor infrastructure, teacher shortages, as well as insecurity. I spoke about this in the previous slide. This only fuels deeper cycle of poverty, and it goes on and on. With the current inflation driving tuition fees higher every single year, many families actually can't keep up. And the consequence for this is potential loss of national development. So when a parent or a sponsor passes away or becomes incapacitated, the education of the kids are often cut short. And what follows is an increase in social vices as young people often loses their way or direction. This is mostly found in the northern part of the country. Yeah, and some of us are privy of this. Then we also have the urban regional divide. Schools in the city have nothing to look like the schools in the rural areas. And this gap is actually enormous. The gap is usually filled by this gap causes higher unemployment rates. To add the gender inequality, especially for girls in the northern part of the country. And if you add to that, what do we actually see? A brain-drained individual that's trying to leave the country other than building it, I think is what we call the Jackpot syndrome. And in today's world, limited digital literacy and poor access to modern learning tools like magic boards and some other softwares that aid children learn better. And that risk exposes us falling behind globally and reduces Nigeria's competitiveness. Finally, the inconsistent government policy with fiscal policy and poor funding. And the price we pay as a country is weakened democratic participation and a generation that is actually less eager in shaping their own future. These are the reality we face, but the good news is there is a solution, and one of the most powerful solutions is that of the education trust. So the solution, what is an education trust and how does it help? But before I actually speak about the education trust, just to put structure in place, I would like to explain what a trust really is. A trust is actually a legal agreement, or let's say a tripartite agreement, where one person, the settlor, places an asset under the control of a trustee to manage or hold in trust for the beneficiary, which can be another person or a group of people, and they give an instruction to the trustee on how to execute it. So with that being said, what exactly is an education trust? To simply put, An education trust is a legal structure that allows you to set aside money specifically for the future education of your child, grandchild, or any beneficiary you care about. The beauty of it is the funds is actually managed by a professional trustee, in this case, Afrinvest trustees. The money is only disbursed for school fees and other related expenses, just the way you instruct. That means no matter what life brings, whether say job loss, illnesses, or even death, your child's education continues without interruption. And that right there is the real power of an education trust. So below this slide, we could see how an education trust works. First, you create the trust with a trustee company. Next, you set the rules, who should benefit, when, how, and under what condition should the trust run. Then you fund the trust, either a one-time contribution or gradually over time, which is compounded. Then finally, the trustee actually invests the money that has been sent into the trust safely and disburses it strictly on the approved education cost. Let me bring this that I've just said to life with a quick example. Imagine a father who suddenly passes away, and while his children are actually still in secondary school. Normally, this would mean that the children will either be dropping out of school or settling for a substandard school. But if he had set up an education trust, the trustee would continue to pay the school fees of the kids right on time. The children would never have to miss a day of school, and their dreams would actually stay intact. And that right there is the peace of mind an education trust provides. It guarantees education continuity no matter what happens. So on the next slide, we see the benefits of an education trust. Now let's talk about some real benefits of setting up an education trust. One of the greatest advantages of setting up an education trust is the access it provides to quality education with tuition fees, books, and other essential resources all taken care of. The financial barriers that are often pose as a setback to students are actually taken out of the way. Beyond that, an education trust offers long-term financial security. Families gain peace of mind knowing fully well that their tuition fees of their kids are fully covered, freeing them to focus on learning and future opportunities other than financial worries. But it doesn't stop there. Many education trusts are actually designed to support beneficiaries way beyond the classroom by providing guidance, mentorship, and career opportunities for the kids that help them transition smoothly into the world. On a large scale, setting up an education trust is also about legacy. For parents, philanthropies, or even institutions, it's a way of giving back to the society and not just investing in one child's future, but in the growth and development of generations to come. In essence, an education trust isn't just about paying school fees. Yeah, it's about securing the futures, creating stability, and leaving a lasting impact that will last beyond a single lifetime. Then we have the advantages of creating an education trust. Education trusts don't just secure education for individual families. They can also transform a lifetime long community, yeah, by focusing on privileged or unmarginalized group. They open doors that would otherwise have remained shut by empowering young people to break out of the circle of poverty and disadvantage. This I've spoken about in the previous slide. Another strength of an education trust is flexibility. Education trusts can actually be tailored to meet specific needs of individuals, whether it's funding a particular career path, say vocational training or professional development, ensuring that, say, beneficiaries of the education trust, yeah, the reason why they set up the trust fully aligns with their goals and aspiration. They also foster the culture of giving back. For philanthropies, family, or even institutions, an education trust provides a structured way to invest in the society. It encourages generosity and builds a sense of shared responsibility for generations. And ultimately, the ripple effect is massive. By equipping people with knowledge, skill, education trust fuels social and economic development by creating more capable workforce and a stronger and more resilient nation. Now, let's bring this closer home with a real life example. For my people that like gist, this one's for you. So on this slide, you see Mr. Okafor. Mr. Okafor was an engineer in Lagos. Lagos, Nigeria, with 3 kids. So back in 2014, he made a decision to set up an education trust where he contributed 20 million naira into it. His plan was quite simple. The trust was to take care of his kids' education all the way through to the university. Sadly, Mr. Okafor passed in 2019. Now, for many families, this would mean the dreams of the kids would be cut short, or probably they would drop out of schools. But because of he had the foresight of setting up an education trust, his kids' education never stopped and was properly taken care of. The trust continued to pay for their tuition fees, their living expense, and their books. His first son actually graduated from Covenant University. And if we are all privy of how the schooling system in Nigeria works, we all know that private school is actually not cheap. Talk more of Covenant. His daughter is currently studying in Canada, and his youngest son is still in school today with all his tuition fees fully covered and paid for. Here's the powerful part. Without the trust being in place, his widowed wife, whose earning is just 100,000 naira a month, would never have been able to sustain the cost of the children's education. This story shows us the difference between setting up an education trust. It's not just about money, it's about keeping dreams alive, no matter what happens. Now, a question that is running through all our minds, as I can guess, would be how was this possible? And I'll be speaking to that shortly in the next slide. So, why you shouldn't wait? This is the table in front of us, clearly spots a comparison between having a trust in place and not having a trust in place. Imagine this: you set aside, say, 10 million naira in an education trust for your kid or for your children, and the money is professionally managed, and he earns, say, 10% per annum for 10 years. Without lifting a finger, this money goes roughly to 25.9 million naira, which is the quiet power of structure as well as compounding working for you. Now, let's flip it. Suppose you didn't set aside anything and 10 years go by with no investment growth or whatsoever, just your regular income. When it comes to time to pay school fees, you're solely relying on your salary. And if life happens, say a job loss, a medical emergency, that means the education dreams of your children could easily be disrupted. What's the difference that it makes? It's not just about saving, as I've earlier mentioned. It's about planning and creating a system that works for you, even when you can't. We have seen lots and lots of examples of parents who started small, but consistently over the years, their children's tuition fee was covered, and now their children are schooling abroad with all their tuition fees currently covered by the trust. Another who didn't plan would probably struggle to keep up because of other factors in place. So the core lesson here that we should all think about is that time and structure are actually our best allies. And as I earlier said when I started, it's better to start now rather than waiting for later. The earlier you start, the easier the journey becomes and the greater peace of mind you are set to enjoy. With all that being said, I'll be handing over to my colleague Chisom to walk us through frequently asked questions that parents, sponsors, and guidance have to ask. Chisom, over to you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, and thank you everyone for joining and for sticking with us up until this point. Please, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat box. Let us know the questions that you have. I would be attempting some of them, which are the questions that we have seen comes often when we speak to clients that need, or we feel that they need to set up a structure like this, as well as when you also have to set up structures like this. But before I go into that, I would just like to highlight the fact that, if you look at the statistics that Samuel has shared with us, you can see how dire it is. There's a large number of schools springing up these days, not a lot of planning around how, the kids, even the indigent ones, as well as our families, can be able to benefit from this. So this is a very good way to say, okay, I want to give back. I think that my driver needs, I want to support my driver. I want to also support a domestic assistant, or anybody that you think, even in your church, if you're looking at ways to give back, you can set up an education trust, and you're very sure that the reason why you have created this plan would be achieved. So it's very important that we have that at the forefront of our minds when thinking about this, not just for ourselves, but you can also use it as a means to give back and ensure that we actually have an education that, system that works and people can benefit from. So I'll move to the questions. Most of these are the questions that we see these days. People ask who can set up an education trust, and like Samuel rightly said, anybody can. The parents, you can set up for your kids, for your guardians, or somebody who you believe can benefit from such a structure. So I hear instances where people say, oh, I don't want to, I see that this child needs this, but if I give the parents the money, or if I give the guardian the money, you're not certain that that money will be used for the purpose it was for, which is the education of the child. You can set up an education trust for that child, and you're rest assured that it will be achieved, depending on, the value that the education trust holds. So the second question would be, can I choose the schools? Absolutely, you can. The idea of creating this plan is we're not just setting up a savings plan for you, but it is something that goes beyond that. Now, depending on the kind of trust, education trust that you wish to start, there could be instances where we sit with you and we say, okay, see, this is what you're earning yearly. This is the kind of school you wish that they go to, and this is what you should be saving. You can either bring a lump sum, or you save towards it monthly or quarterly, or however it is that works best for your current finances. So absolutely, you can choose the school, but we can also prefer advice, and we say, okay, this is what you can do. Maybe not now, but in the future, you can start saving for the university degree today, even though they're still in preschool or they're still in elementary school, for example. You can start today to think about that. So what happens if my child decides not to go to school? So it's a very interesting question, because first and foremost, you need to look at your child and understand in the early years what my child is very good at. And it's always advisable for parents to be able to support their child. You can also create structures around, making sure that they have, let's say, the basic educational qualifications. So for example, the basic can be at least get through high school, or at least get a university degree, and then you can pursue whether it's music, whether it's content creating these days. It could be any of these things, but you should be able to support them and be with them along each and every step of the way. And this is something that we can assist you. So you're not just creating just for education per se, but for a well-rounded child. Okay, so even if they don't decide to go through the usual way, you're also able to support them and make sure that you're there with them. And that's what an education trust can assist you to do. So can it be used for foreign education? Absolutely. There are instances where we have clients that say, okay, I want my child to go to an Ivy League school. I have to make sure that they do that. You have to start saving today for that, making sure that you have certain investments that hedges against the naira devaluation, and then ensuring that you're saving for that particular goal. And you make it clear that this is my plan. And once you have that plan in place, set up a structure like an education trust, and that ensures that you get to that goal. So the question is the money safe? Absolutely, the money is safe. We are not just a trust firm. We understand the fiduciary nature of what we do. Aside from being highly regulated by the SEC and licensed to deliver trust services, we understand that we're not just giving a service. We're not just doing a service. We're doing something that outlives you. So we're creating a structure that ensures that we always say God forbid when we talk about death, but however, it is a fact of life. But if the eventuality happens, what happens to your kids? So these are the things that you have to think about, and it ensures that your goal is achieved and the funds are being invested in safe instruments. Under the Investment and Securities Act, you have trustees are mandated to ensure that funds are not invested in risky instruments. And that's because of the fiduciary nature of what we do. So funds are absolutely safe. And can we add more funds? Absolutely. You can add more funds. So we always like to meet our clients wherever they are. So you have clients that want to start small, you have clients that want to start big, you have clients that have come into a certain amount of money and they say, you know what, I think this money will do good. I want my child to achieve this. I want my child to go to this particular school. And obviously you hold that fund for a moment and then we ensure that it gets a certain level of interest and accrues into the fund. Always very important to note that when you're creating plans like this, you have to look at what your goals are. Very, very important that you first understand your goal so that you're not looking at this plan as a commercial bank. Okay, we're not looking at it as setting up just an account. You're setting up something that should get to the purpose, which is the reason why we always say when you're setting up this plan with us for the first 2 years, you are not allowed to liquidate. Right? If there is a need, there's an emergency, and you need to liquidate, there will be certain interests and cuts that will be taken, just so that you have that savings culture and you fully understand that you're creating something that should have a purpose that needs to be achieved. So, what if the trustee mismanages the funds? Well, that's it. Well, as people ask these questions a lot, and I understand that there's a certain level of distrust when it comes to having a third party manage your funds, and people worry about that, and it's just one of the reasons why we have conversations like this. But if that ever occurs, which is not Afrinvest trustees, but if that ever occurs, there are legal safeguards in place. And for us at Afrinvest, how we usually manage things like this is, we always have to report within the year. When you set up a fund, a trust fund like this, within the year, we ensure that we always send you either monthly or quarterly reports. For investment, we don't invest without the settlers' knowledge. We always ensure that you're fully informed to the best of our abilities about what your investment is doing, what the interest rates are like, and then the terms of that investment. So that gives a certain level of transparency, and you understand that these funds are being managed effectively, and there's no such need to worry about any of such the trustees misappropriating funds. Because another particular instance need that you need to know about our services is that our funds are not commingled with trust assets. They're clearly separated, and that's something that our regulators ensure that they look out for every year when it comes to the service that we provide. So how early should I start? You should start today, right now, because this is I think the school term will soon be over. In December the school term, in January a new school term starts. So I think it's very important that we start to think about creating these plans now, so that there will not be rush. Considering that we're getting into the yellow tide season and there's going to be a lot of spending and all of that. And then in January, you're running around looking to get loans, to pay school fees and all of that. So it is very, very important that we start today. So can I set up for a child that is not mine? Absolutely. And like I said in the beginning, people might say, oh, I already have a plan in place. I have something I save in an account. The trust element is very key, that you understand that being able to have a plan that outlives you. If anything happens to you, you're able to transfer that. It's very good. And also to use this as a means to give back to people that you think will be able to benefit from this is very, very key. And you can do that for friends, for adopted children, for children of people that you are aware that they lost family members. So you can do that. So what's the cost of setting up this education trust? So it now depends on the type. You could have, there's what we call the standard one. So it's a minimum setup cost of 300,000. And then the management cost varies based on the value. Now for the premium plan, like I spoke to you earlier, I said, this is where we sit down with you and we say, okay, this is what you earn, this is what you should be saving. We can have a more direct access. We look at the school, prefer solutions, pay the school fees. So one thing I always like to tell my clients that, listen, if you can start today, you can always grow into having a premium plan. Right, so let's not look at let's not let that not discourage you, if you know what I mean. So you can begin wherever you are, and then the annual management fees are dependent on the value that we're working with you. Now, there's certain people that have more complicated structures that they want to have, then it comes with a cost, if you know. And for us at Afrinvest Trustees, we usually run campaigns on our educational trust. I think the last one we had was due before the September rush. We always, have some of these trust funds set up free. So I want you to look out for such if you are looking to set it up as a means to begin. And if you look and follow us on most of our social, on the Afrinvest platform, on our social media, you see that when we run this campaign, so because we want people to have the understanding that trust funds are not just for the rich, you can always start where you are and grow and build, because it's a lifetime journey, and Afrinvest Trustees wants to be with you in that journey. So I'll move quickly to our product offering so that we can have time for questions. So Afrinvest Trustees Limited is a key player in both the corporate trust space, the private trust space, and the public trust space. So for us in the private trust space, we've spoken about an education trust. At least you have a fair understanding of what that is. We also offer will services. Now, for those who don't know, a will is one of the most popular means of estate planning, which is, planning for the future. So it's really just the testamentary disposition from, from the grave, saying, I want to give this to this person and I'm no longer here. And it kicks off, when death happens. Now, for the private investment trust is just a trust that holds liquid assets. So just money, right? Some people can say, oh, I don't have properties, I don't have this, I don't have that. I don't think I need a trust. Well, you have cash. You have money sitting down in the bank. You have money just, doing nothing for you, and also not protecting, and also it doesn't have any say in what happens when you're no longer there. You can start by creating a private investment trust. I also had clients that started their trust journey by just starting with a private investment trust. They were committed, they stayed on, and before you know it, they moved to having a living trust. So now a living trust is a more flexible and more structured plan that covers a lot of assets. It is very flexible, and we call it the king of all trust, really. So it's just a trust plan that's, then you begin to see how it runs today, and you can have changes to it. It's flexible, and it can hold a lot of, assets that you might have. Now, for the life insurance, we have partnerships with one of the foremost life insurance companies in the world. And, the idea is not just protection. It's being able to pass on a huge amount of money for your loved ones. Now, remember that when you set up a trust, for example, when you set up an education trust with an insurance element to it, it's one of the perfect ways of estate planning. Because what that means is that, for example, if you've saved for a while, and God forbid, and something happens to you, it just means that two things kick off. What is left in the trust fund and the insurance kicks off at the same time. And that also happens when you set up a living trust plan with also an insurance benefit. So please, if you want more information on this, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll, guide you on that. Now, for the celebrity trust, we have a plan for celebrities. There's a lot of content creators these days who run into a lot of money. As much as we have celebrities in the industry, we all know them, and sometimes when they're no longer as popular as they used to be, you hear of them needing funds, and we wonder to ourselves why. When you're in the limelight, when you have access to a lot of money, it's a very good time to start to create structures around protecting your assets and then also transferring them to your beneficiaries. So we'll move quickly to the corporate trust. For the ESOP just simply means employee share schemes. So this is very popular for people in the tech space. But these days, a lot of employers and employees need more. And for you to have that sort of plan in place, you need a trustee that sits in a almost like an umpire, so to speak, that ensures that the employee share scheme is done properly, the allocations are done right, and then you also have a means of ensuring that if you're bringing in people, you understand what the equity is and the share scheme and all of this, ensuring that there is proper transparency and there's continuity. That's what the trustee does. So if you're an employee here and an employer and you think that this is a good plan, I really want to have this, I want to be able to retain my employees, or I want to also be able to, I think that this is something that my employer would be willing to give to me because I key into the vision of my company, we can do this for you. Now for escrow services, we sit in as trustees to ensure that, for example, somebody wants to purchase a large, massive piece of property and there's a bit of distrust between the buyer and the seller, we can come in and say, okay, you know what, we could hold title or we could hold the funds in escrow until, you know, certain obligations have been fulfilled. Now for the security trustees, this happens a lot in the corporate space where corporate entities might need to, you know, seek for additional funding or additional lending to grow their business. Now the trustees can hold that asset in security for, you know, the lender, ensuring that things are done properly and the funds are being used for the purpose it was taken for, and, you know, ensure that there is, you know, equitable management of the funds. Now for facility agency, this is a bit different but sort of similar, but in this instance you have more than one lender, and you know what that means. It means that there are different needs, different agendas and wishes, and then the trustees ensures that all of these are properly managed, there is proper communication, and that there is, you know, equitable use of the funds, and the lenders are happy, as well as, you know, the borrower. Now for fund services, trustees sit as trustees, so, you know, the very popular mutual funds, collective investment schemes, because these are pools of funds from various people around the country. So it's very important that the trustees manage and ensure that the fund managers are doing what they should do. So, and for the public space, very similar to what we have in the corporate space, but it's just, you know, the borrower in this instance is the government. So it could be the federal government or the municipal states, right? And then the trustees also has that fiduciary obligation to ensure that, you know, investors' wishes are well protected. So that's it. Some of the service offerings. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we will guide you. I think we can now take questions. I can see that the chat box is. We have a lot of questions. So, Samuel, please let's take some of the questions that we can and round up. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll allow you to answer these questions. Someone in the chat box says, what happens if the kids finish their education and the funds are not exhausted?
So that's a good one. If the funds are not exhausted, you can decide to either distribute it equally among the beneficiaries, or you can say, you know what, since the funds are not exhausted, I would support my grandchild. We have instances where the education trust is not just for direct descendants, but also not just for the first generation, but the second and third generation. So you can decide to either distribute it equally or keep it for their children. So that's an option that you can choose.
Okay. Someone says, please, what is the least amount to be invested monthly?
So I mean, you can start. I think the minimum for the simple structure is 100,000. So you can start saving 100,000 every month. The reason why we say that is because, I mean, if you look at the cost of schools these days, even 100,000 might not be too much, but we want to encourage people to start now. And that's the reason why having a plan in place is important. If you already have a child in school, you should start saving for the next level today. So yes, you can start with 100,000, but we always advise you to, if you come into certain bulk sums, think about putting it into the fund. So yes. Are there any other?
Yes. So someone says, "Oh, the recordings will be shared as well as the slides. It will be shared since you registered." Someone says, "Are there monthly payments to be paid?" This question is not quite straightforward. When you say are there monthly payments to be paid, So the way the education trust works is either a bullet payment or compounding. So you inflow money into the education trust frequently. Yeah. So if you look at slide 17, doesn't state that the trust will be okay. Well, that was an example. An example. The 10% rate per annum was actually an example. The other factors that come in place, I mean, like inflation, the NPR rates, there are a lot of factors that come in place. But of course, before the money is invested, we'll have a conversation with you. So that was just an example. Um,
Yeah,
someone
so
says, no, you could go ahead, Giselle.
Yeah, so I saw a question, I think, yes. They said, does your partner life insurance company offer the life insurance payout to beneficiaries after the settlers? Absolutely. So that's the idea. So it's a life insurance. So after the settlers' demise, you would have that paid out. Now, it depending on what the agreement is. So if you're having a trust structure, the best thing would be for the trust itself to be the beneficiary of that insurance plan. The reason is you want to ensure that the whole idea of have taken out that insurance is not defeated, because if your beneficiaries, for example, at a very young age, God forbid, run into a large sum of money, who's to say they would not run, for lack of a better word, blow it away? So the idea is to have a trustee that ensures that the funds are kept for the purpose and it's not destroyed. So yes, I just wanted to speak on that.
Okay, so someone says, let's talk more about standard trust. Okay, at the end of this presentation, you will be seeing our contacts there. So feel free to reach out to us so we could actually have that conversation. Someone says, is it possible that Afrinvest puts in place? I think this is for auto debiting specifically every month. So we don't have that feature yet, but you could send an instruction to your bank to credit the trust every month, pending when we have that feature. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah, we have clients that already do that. So there's a standing debit order on their accounts and they just transfer. So also pending where we have that feature, we would always inform our clients.
Someone says, can I save for my unborn child? Yes, of course. You could set up a trust for your unborn children. It's a feature we offer. It's not a legal trust. So someone says, in setting up the living trust, for example, can the term life insurance benefits be the life insurance benefit be added to the service? I'll allow you answer that, Chisholm.
Yeah, so like I said, it's one of the interesting ways to actually have a very robust estate plan. So ideally, the trust should be the beneficiary of the insurance plan, so that your beneficiaries would not go outside of what the trust is. So when you set up a living trust, you have what is called a trust deed. The trust deed is what governs the entirety of the life of that trust, and it stipulates what your wishes are, the objectives of the trust, the powers of the trustees, and all of that. So for example, you can also have a protector of the trust. Now, if you have created a life insurance, ideally that life insurance should be able to pass to the beneficiaries of the trust. And a trustee has to hold the assets to be able to do their work. So the insurance policy now, the trust itself now has to hold that insurance policy and to be able to distribute it to the beneficiaries at the eventuality. However, there are instances where you can say, oh, you know what, let the beneficiaries just have direct access. That's fine, but we always like to advise you on the pros and the cons of making that decision. So please reach out to us so that we can guide you on that front. Thank you. Okay. So because, okay, I just saw another question. So because it's a life insurance, you cannot access it except you're having an insurance that has an investment elements to it. So like I said, please reach out to us so that we can speak to you on that. So the question is, I want a multi-layer revocable living trust, example, having the education trust into the living trust. Absolutely. Like I said, the living trust is what we call the king of trusts, and it's very flexible. It can hold a lot of assets. I said to you also that I've had clients that started from just the private investment trust, and that's because his assets were just at the time liquid assets. And as he grew, he started to, I think he got married, and from getting married, he started to think about education. And the education was then put as part of the purpose of setting up that trust, and so many other things, even charitable needs can also be included in it. Even so much can be done with the living trust. So absolutely, you can have that multi-layer living trust. Okay, I think so what if the settlor loses their source of income while alive and the beneficiaries access the funds? Well, so I think this would fall under what I would say is an emergency need. So if there is a loss of source of income and you come to us and say, oh, this is what's happened, we need to liquidate the funds, absolutely we will do that, because we understand the peculiarity or the nature of what has occurred. So yes, we'll be able to do that. So far as if it's gone through at least the first 2 years. But if for emergency purpose, yes, we would be able to liquidate that funds for the beneficiaries.
So here on the slide, you can see our contact details. Also, someone has a question in the chat box that says, a situation whereby you save up for your children and the education trust, in an education trust, and something happens to the beneficiary now, how would that be handled?
So in the unfortunate event that something happens to the beneficiary, it just means that the purpose of the trust has faltered, and we'll start to think about if the settlor wishes to terminate the trust or give it to a charitable cause, sort of things. But the idea is that the funds that has been saved up still reverts back to the settlor. Now the settlor now has to make a decision to either terminate or decide another purpose for the use of the funds. So I'll contact the screen, but you can also send an email to trustees@afrinvest.com, and we'll be able to reach out to you. Trustees@afrinvest.com. So someone says, what happens when funds are exhausted while kids are still in school? That's what I said earlier, that a trust cannot exist in a vacuum, really. We would be only able to work with what we have. So if the funds become exhausted, the trust really has no assets that the trustee is holding. So that would then mean there needs to be more inflows into the trust fund, for example. And yes. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for sticking with us. We really appreciate your time and your questions. Please, we have included our contact details, which is trustees@afrinvest.com for inquiries. We'll also be sending the slides and also sending the answers to your questions as well. So we want to thank you for joining, and please ensure to keep a date with us in the next one. Thank you.